Today on NewsWatch, the moment of truth. Voters from a dozen states hit the polls for Super Tuesday. Will Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton come out on top? Plus, one-on-one with Dr. Ben Carson, the underdog candidate talks about the spiritual crisis in America and how to solve it. And Medal of Honor winner, meet the Navy SEAL who saved an American missions worker from the Taliban. Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Caitlin Burke. The presidential primary season goes nationwide today. It's Super Tuesday, the biggest voting day of the year leading up to the general election. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are both leading their parties in national polls. But will voters in some states send a new message? Dale Hurd has the story.
1/4 of Americans in a dozen states and a U.S. territory are going to the polls today, with a combined 1,610 delegates on the line for both parties. Clinton and Trump are looking to solidify their positions as the clear frontrunners for their party's nominations. Clinton challenger Bernie Sanders and Trump rivals Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz are trying to remain alive.
And the only campaign that can beat Donald Trump is us.
Cruz is hoping to win decisively in his home state of Texas. Leading up to today's vote, he was out talking about religious liberty and the Supreme Court nomination.
Well, let me be very clear to the men and women of Texas. I will not compromise away your religious liberty.
And the jabs between Donald Trump and Marco Rubio were still flying.
We are not going to allow a con artist to take control of the party of Lincoln and Reagan.
In Florida, where he comes from, this guy couldn't be elected dog catcher.
And at Trump's appearance in Virginia, tension as a Time magazine photographer and a Secret Service agent got into a scuffle.
He grabbed me by the neck.
And protesters tried to disrupt the Trump rally.
Tens of thousands of people. Are you back there, darling? Who's protesting? Anybody? Oh, get out of here. Get him out. Get him out.
Ted Cruz has a good chance to claim both Texas and Arkansas, while Marco Rubio might hang on to win Minnesota. But Trump seems to be in the lead everywhere else, including Rubio's home state of Florida. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton looks to maintain her lead over Bernie Sanders.
I don't think America has ever stopped being great. What we need to do now is make America whole.
We can win the Democratic nomination.
But only if Sanders can pull a rabbit out of the hat today. A fundraising email from Clinton shows she's already looking past Sanders and targeting GOP frontrunner Donald Trump. And some think Trump could take a hit if the New York Times releases an audio tape from an off-the-record meeting at the newspaper in January. The recording allegedly shows Trump doesn't believe what he's saying about immigration. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Today, President Obama is meeting with Senate Republican leaders who say they will not consider any Supreme Court nominee until the next president fills the vacancy. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley meet with Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, and Senate Democrats to discuss the issue. Justice Antonin Scalia's death has sparked controversy over who will fill the vacant seat. A major victory for Apple. A judge in Brooklyn says the company cannot be forced to help the FBI unlock the iPhone in a narcotics case. That ruling will be used by Apple in the much larger case they're fighting involving the iPhone of one of the terrorists in the San Bernardino shooting. The FBI says the data on that iPhone might help them find other terrorists here in the U.S., but Apple maintains that writing a code to unlock that one iPhone would compromise the security of millions.
The way we know would be to write a piece of software that we view as sort of the software equivalent of cancer.
Today, Apple's lawyers are on Capitol Hill being questioned by the House Judiciary Committee. The Georgia Senate has proposed a bill that allows faith-based groups to decline service to couples based on their religious convictions on marriage. Georgia Governor Nathan Deal says he wants to give the security that faith-based community thinks they need, but he says he will oppose any bill that is perceived as allowing discrimination. The legislation would protect religious adoption agencies, schools, and other organizations from being denied government funding for their views on marriage. Well, a Navy SEAL has won the highest military honor for his heroic rescue of a Christian doctor captured in Afghanistan. Edward Byers is the first member of the Navy to receive the Medal of Honor in 40 years. But as White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon reports, Byers says he's not the real hero.
On a cold December night 3 years ago, Edward Byers and a team of Navy SEALs were on a covert mission in the mountains of Afghanistan. 3 days earlier, American doctor Dilip Joseph had been captured by the Taliban while carrying out a Christian medical mission.
There was reason to believe that a Taliban commander was on his way to take custody of the American hostage and move him into Pakistan. So time was of the essence.
Byers and his Navy SEAL teammates were there to take Joseph home. A hostage rescue is something Byers calls a no-fail mission. After a difficult 4-hour hike through the mountains, Byers and his team finally reached Dr. Joseph and took on the enemy. Byers' teammate, Navy SEAL Nick Check, was first to fire on a guard outside and was hit.
And I made my way in right behind him, and I went down my wall and I engaged one of the enemy that was on the back side of the wall. And then I saw another person moving across the floor.
Perhaps the hostage, perhaps another guard lunging for a weapon. The struggle was hand to hand. Ed straddled him, pinning him down. Ed adjusted his night vision goggles. Things came into focus and he was on top of a guard.
At the same time this is happening, we're calling out, trying to find the location of the American hostage. And finally, he spoke up. And it was at that time that I engaged the person I was on top of and jumped off the guy I was on and onto the doctor, who was about 3 or 4, maybe 5 feet away from me to my right.
While shielding Dr. Joseph with his body, Byers detected another threat.
There was a guy who was right behind him within arm's reach, who was armed, and I was able to pin that guy to the wall by his throat.
It was chaotic, but within minutes, Byers had saved the life of Dr. Joseph and his teammates. For his valor, President Obama awarded him with the highest honor of the military. But success came with a price. The first SEAL to rush in during the rescue, Nick Check, didn't survive.
The award is truly his. He was an American hero, and he was a hero of that operation.
Although Byers and his fellow SEALs are among the most elite fighters in the world, Byers says he relies on his faith in battle.
I wore the St. Michael the Archangel patch on my back for every deployment, every mission I've ever been on. And I've always said a prayer to protect us and look over us. And that's gave me a lot of resiliency and to be able to carry on.
He joins a prestigious list of military men who've worn or wear the Medal of Honor.
I in particular want to acknowledge my beautiful wife, my incredible daughter, whose support has been unwavering.
Soon, he'll go back to the job he loves. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, the White House.
French authorities are tearing down one of the largest and roughest makeshift refugee camps in Europe. Known as the Jungle, the Calais camp sits about 20 miles from the English Channel. Once home to 6,000 refugees, only around 3,000 remain. As bulldozers and helmeted workers began their work, some 200 migrants threw rocks and set fire to tents, leading riot police to fire tear gas. International scrutiny over bad conditions at the Jungle led to last week's court order to tear it down. A new €20 million facility nearby will house 1,500 people, but refugees worry registering will keep them out of the UK. From illegal immigration to health care to Iran's nuclear deal, GOP presidential hopeful Dr. Ben Carson took on those topics and more in a Regent University presidential forum on the eve of Super Tuesday. Before sitting down with CBN's Pat Robertson for a candid interview, Carson began by telling the audience what drew him into politics. Charlene Aaron has more.
Absolutely delighted to be back home at Regent University, having spent a number of years on the board here.
A lively crowd greeted Ben Carson at Regent University's presidential forum, where he talked about why he entered the political arena.
People ask me all the time, why, after a wonderful career in medicine, would you get into the slimy world of politics? And I ask myself that too. You know, is it really worth all the things you have to go through? You know, the lies and the attacks on you and on your family. And the answer is, No. Not if you're doing it for yourself. But if you're doing it for others, the answer is emphatically yes. Because remember, all the people who did things for us. As a youngster, I was a horrible student until my wonderful mother, with her third grade education and a horrendous life, prayed to God for wisdom. How could she get her sons to understand the importance of education? And you know what? God gave her the wisdom.
Thank you, Ben. Carson's speech was followed by an interview with Regent University founder and chancellor Pat Robertson.
Have a seat and let's talk a little bit.
Okay.
You have taken on this responsibility, and you've traveled this country, and you've observed the people, and you've talked to people, and you've seen what's happening. Give me your take on this country. What do you think is happening to America?
Well, I think people in America are frightened, and I think they're angry. They're frightened because they recognize that there are global radical Islamic terrorists who want to destroy us, and they don't get the impression that our government recognizes the seriousness of the situation. I mean, all you have to do is go down to the border and see how people are just flowing across the border. I went down there. I mean, there was a fence there, but it was the kind of thing that would have barely slowed me down as a kid. And, you know, the sheriffs down there were telling me about all the people who are coming through who are what they call OTMs, other than Mexicans, coming from Northern Africa and the Middle East, not being screened in any way, setting up their cells here. So, you know, people are concerned about that. And they're angry because they keep sending people to Congress who are supposed to change things, but nothing gets changed. It gets staying exactly the same. Now, the problem, of course, is when people make decisions based on anger and fear, they usually don't make good decisions. So it's very important that we make sure people are properly educated and fully understand what's going on.
Coming up, our one-on-one interview with Dr. Ben Carson continues. Hear his plan for restoring virtue to America. Before the break, we told you how GOP presidential hopeful Dr. Ben Carson visited the Regent University Presidential Forum Monday, right before today's Super Tuesday primaries. CBN's Pat Robertson asked Carson about a broad range of topics, from Obamacare to Supreme Court nominees. Here's Charlene Aaron with more of that interview.
We've had so much discussion about immigrants, about undocumented aliens and so forth, sending them back, leaving them here, having paid. What would you do with those people?
Well, actually, and please go to bencarson.com. You can read all about it, and about multiple policies on everything. But, you know, in Yuma County, Arizona, you know, there are 9 sectors across. And in one of the sectors, which is in Yuma County, Arizona, they placed a layered fence with an asphalt road in between for quick access. They put border guards on the border, and there's a novel idea. And then they also prosecuted first-time offenders. They stopped the illegal traffic by 97%. That's amazing. Now, if we did the same thing across all 9 sectors and included motion detectors and drones for early detection, I think you could get it pretty close to 100. People say, well, they dig underneath. No, because we have radar equipment, which will show whether that's happening. Now, that would stop that part of the migration. The second part is you have to cut off the spigot that supplies the goodies. There can be no goodies. If there are no goodies, people aren't going to be incentivized to come here. So you stop that. And then I think it's, you still have the 11.5 million people here. What are you going to do with them? I would provide them, if they have a clean record, a good record, an opportunity, 6-month window to get registered as guest workers. They have to have a job. They have to pay a back tax penalty. They have to pay taxes going forward. They do not vote. They do not become American citizens. if they want to be American citizens, they have to go through exactly the same thing that any other person would have to go through, because we already have adequate laws to do that.
Carson also discussed the Iran nuclear deal and the declining credibility of the United States.
You know, that was done as an executive privilege, and it wasn't done as a treaty. I think it should have been done as a treaty because it had wide implications. And not only was it a horrible deal, but you know, what does it say to all of our friends and allies throughout the Arabian Peninsula?
ISIS, ISIL, Islamic State in the Levant, Islamic State in Syria. Why don't you think the president will call those people who they are? He will not use the term Islamic terrorist. He will not use it. What mindset do you think's going on there?
Well, it's hard to understand his mindset, to be honest with you. You know, last week, as you know, the media was all over me because I said Barack Obama didn't grow up with the typical African-American experience. And I said, you know, he grew up in Hawaii. He had white grandparents who were very affluent, went to a private school, spent his formative years from 10 to 14 in Indonesia with his white mother. I said, do you think that's a typical African-American experience? But, you know, during those formative years, who knows what was going through his head? And then when he came back here, you know, mentor Frank Marshall Davis, a card-carrying communist. So it's very hard to understand what his motivations are and what he thinks.
The interview also covered domestic policy and the issue of health care.
The administration jammed down our throat something that's known as Obamacare. It has turned out to be a disaster. What would you do to fix that?
Well, I don't know that it can be fixed, but I would certainly provide something. See, I don't think it's reasonable for the government to come up with something, and then it's so horrible that you have to force people into it. I think you have to have something that's so attractive that everybody wants it. So what I proposed is, you know, health empowerment accounts, which are just like a health savings account, minus the bureaucrats.
CBN News chief political correspondent David Brody moderated the forum and fielded questions from the audience.
As president, what would you do to promote a return to virtue in the national mentality that we have today, specifically in the youth of this nation? Very crucial question here.
Well, one of the reasons that we've gotten away from virtue is because of the politically correct environment that says there is no right, there is no wrong, everything is relative. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the values and principles that made us into a great nation. And this is a nation that does have a Judeo-Christian foundation. And a lot of people try to tell you that our founders, they were deists and they didn't believe in God. That's not true. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said, can anything occur without God's notice and intervention? And he rules in the affairs of man. If he can see a sparrow fall and be caring about it. You wouldn't say that if you were a deist. If I were president, I would work very hard on eliminating the ban on Christianity in our public schools.
What are your specific criteria for a judicial nominee?
I think you have to look at their entire life. And, you know, Matthew 7:20 says, by their fruit you will know them. That's what I mean by the fruit salad. You look at what kind of things have they ruled on, what kind of groups are they associated with, what have they done throughout their lives will tell you a lot more than an interview or several interviews that they've been prepped for.
Up next, he was raising 23 children, and as you might imagine, he needed some help. Find out how CBN came to the rescue after this. For over 50 years, CBN Partners have given food and supplies to people around the world. In Thailand, they helped one man who was raising 23 children.
As Malachi rushed up this mountain in Thailand, he knew a baby's life was in danger. The mother had died in childbirth.
The woman who called me was a Christian. She said the father wanted to put the baby under her mother's body until she stopped breathing.
Malachi quickly rescued the newborn and, with the father's consent, brought her home to his wife. They adopted her and named her Mook, which means pearl.
I was orphaned when I was a child, and I knew she really was a precious gift to our family. Mook really is like a pearl.
Mook is just one of the 20 orphaned or vulnerable children that the couple has taken in. For years, Malachi grew rice on a borrowed field to support them. Then the owner took back his field, and the children's home ran low on food and money.
The thought of sending the children away made me feel terrible. I didn't know what to do. We needed help.
Malachi and Sopa gathered the children together to pray. When CBN met the couple who had opened their home to baby Mook and so many other children, we offered to help. First, we gave them enough rice, noodles, eggs, and fish to feed everyone for a month. Next, we built them a new kitchen to be able to properly prepare that food. Finally, to help Malachi and Sopa to keep the children's home open, we provided everything needed to start 2 businesses, one weaving and the other raising fish to eat and sell. And this is Mook now, at age 2, both healthy and happy.
I'm so grateful for CBN's help. You showed mercy to our children and gave them a future. I believe things will just keep getting better and better for our home.
Finally today, we're taking a look at something remarkable. This is what's being called a super bloom. It's happening in Death Valley, California. The area is one of the driest places on Earth. It typically only gets about 2 inches of rain each year. But this year, the area got more than usual, just enough to transform it into this. Just another reminder of God's majesty. Even if you're feeling dead and dry in your own life, remember there are seeds planted in you that are just waiting for the right conditions to break forth and show God's beauty. That's it for now on CBN NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com. And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or Twitter. Have a great day.